Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in and watching. R.A. Martinez, president of MAPS Global, and I want to communicate to all of you who have been following us and tracking with us and supporting MAPS Global over the years, how we are thinking, what we are doing to respond, and how we are praying for the current situation, conflict, and crisis in Israel. And so if you don't know, many of you do know, there is a war that has commenced in the nation of Israel between Israel and Hamas and now Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorist groups who are waging war on Israel. And there are many, many innocent people that are caught in between and in the midst of this conflict, losing their lives, women, children, babies even, and it's been heartbreaking to watch the atrocities unfold. What we're doing about it? Well, if you've been tracking with us for any amount of time, or maybe you're new, I want to let you know that we do have long-term missionaries and long-term bases that are in nations that are surrounding Israel and in this region. Our long-term bases have proximity to this conflict. And so they're there praying, preaching, and singing. And our long-term teams and leaders and bases are beginning to mobilize prayer, and they're gathering prayer. And for a lot of people don't know, and it's not something we widely broadcast for security reasons, but the demographics of our prayer rooms and our houses of prayer in these nations are not just Western missionaries, American missionaries. The demographics of the intercessors and the singers and musicians in our prayer rooms and our different bases is multi-ethnic. And many of our prayer rooms have Arab and Palestinian believers who are right now, as we speak, praying for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. It's a miracle that's happening. And those are some of the things you might not hear if you're paying attention to the news, is that there is really a body of believers in Jesus across the whole region that is in unity together and praying for each other and loving and serving each other, and our bases are right in the middle of that. Now, what's very interesting, and it's not uncommon to our history at MAPS Global, is that we had already had a 50-hour prayer event on the schedule for next week at our Levant mission space. Now, this was planned months and months and months ago before the crisis broke out, but we knew prophetically that it was important to plan a nonstop prayer meeting in the Levant. And so that is going to be happening next week, next Thursday, October 19th through the 21st, Thursday through Saturday night. And our team will be on the ground there, our long-term team, hosting nonstop prayer and worship as the conflict escalates and unfolds. And so, again, like the years before, we find ourselves right in the middle of conflict and crisis with the tools of prayer and worship to stand with the Lord as He's unfolding, releasing mercy and unfolding His purposes through the region. And so please be praying for us and for our team in the Levant as they host 50 hours of unbroken worship and prayer next week, October 19th through the 21st. In addition to that, we are praying in our global prayer room here in Richmond almost every day for the crisis, for mercy, and I'll give you our prayer points in a minute, for the situation, for the people that are caught up in this conflict. And so you're welcome to join us if you're in the Richmond region in our noon prayers here in a global prayer room. And over the next weeks, surely we'll be praying for this continually. The third way we're responding is by serving the local church, and we have many friends that are in the nation of Israel itself leading prayer and leading ministries. And so we are in the process of reaching out to see how we can serve them, how we can support them, not only from our headquarters here in Richmond, but also from our bases that have proximity in the region. So thank you so much for praying for us and with us as we respond to this crisis. Now, I want to give everyone who's following us a little bit of insight on how we are praying. I'm going to give you 5 prayer points, and this is how we are praying. This is how we view the role of prayer right now. I know there's a lot of many different ministries responding in many different ways and have many different prayer points and ideas of how to pray. And I don't really have a lot of commentary on that. This is what I want to do right now, is just say how we're praying. And if you want to agree in prayer with us, this is how we're praying. So number 1, first prayer point, how MAPS Global is praying for the current situation in Israel, is that we are praying for the church in Israel and the church across the Middle East to be strengthened, to be a bold witness for the gospel, and to be messengers of mercy right now in the midst of conflict. And throughout the last 2,000 years of church history, the church has been a mediating force as kingdoms and governments and conflict ensues in the earth. God raises up his church as a witness to the gospel. And I think particularly to this region, the church, body of Yeshua, not only in Israel, but in the surrounding nations, the believers in the church in the West Bank. There are believers, brothers and sisters in Gaza, churches in Lebanon and Jordan and Syria and Egypt, all these surrounding nations, that this one body of believers would be a bold witness for the gospel and to manifest the beauty of one new man together prophetically across the region. And so we're praying for the church. I believe this is one of the primary ways we are to pray. You know, when I look at the New Testament, every one of the prayers in the New Testament, with the exception of 1 or 2 for the lost, every one of the prayers in the New Testament is for the church and for churches, because the church is God's witness in the earth. Ephesians 3:10, Paul says that the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known to rulers and authorities in heavenly places through the ecclesia, the church. And so we're praying, and we have been praying here, for prophets, for a prophetic witness, for leaders, for believers in Israel and the surrounding nations to begin to speak prophetically with boldness the gospel and the word of the Lord right now in the midst of conflict. And we're praying for peacemakers, Matthew 5, peacemakers, those who would proclaim and demonstrate the cross and be voices for peace in the middle of conflict. The church is always the prophetic witness, and especially when boundaries and borders of kingdoms and countries and governments shift, which they have throughout history, the church is always there to preach the gospel. And many times throughout history, when boundaries and borderlines shift and conflict comes to the earth, it opens a door for the gospel, because people and nations, they become vulnerable to the gospel. And so we're praying for that right now. We're praying for the church in this region, our brothers and sisters, to be strengthened, to be comforted, and to be a bold prophetic witness for the gospel. Number 2, we are praying that the Lord would restrain, and that we would participate by asking the Lord to restrain demonic assignments, strongholds against the Jewish people and against the resistance, against the gospel spreading throughout the region into neighborhoods and nations. Matthew 16, Jesus himself said, on this rock, which is the revelation of Jesus, he said, I'm going to build my ecclesia, my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And he says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will have been loosed in heaven. And so we're taking up that ministry of binding and loosing with the global church and with the church, our brothers and sisters in that region, and saying, Lord, we bind demonic assignments against the Jewish people and against innocent people caught up in the middle of this conflict. And Lord, release mercy and peace. And the third thing we're praying, number 3, is we're praying for laborers. We are praying for laborers to be thrust into the harvest field of Israel and of the Middle East. Matthew 9:38, Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest that he would ekbalo, laborers into his harvest field. Many in the body of Christ are not aware that the Jewish people in Israel are considered an unreached people group. They are without a witness of the gospel. And the Messianic church in the land is growing and maturing, but as a whole, they are without a witness of the gospel, which means the primary concern from a missions perspective and missiological perspective, the primary concern is for the gospel to be proclaimed to the Jewish people and to the unreached peoples in the nations and neighborhoods surrounding Israel. And so we're praying for laborers. Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 2 that we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi. And as you know, we had boldness in God to declare the gospel in the midst of much conflict. In the days to come, the Great Commission being fulfilled and the witness of the gospel to every nation, it will come in the midst of great conflict. And we're praying even now, Lord, thrust laborers into the harvest field of Israel and the harvest field of the Middle East. Number 4, we're praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Many of you may have seen this verse, Psalm 122:6, from other leaders and ministries, maybe on social media. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And what we mean when we say the peace of Jerusalem is, Lord, intervene and mitigate the conflict. Lord, sovereignly step in and de-escalate conflicts so that people and lives are spared. And so we're praying for the peace of Jerusalem. We're asking, Lord, to step in and intervene. And number 5, we are praying for mercy and protection for people, real people. Many times in our intercessory burdens, we forget that intercession for nations and conflicts and regions, it boils down to real people, real people's lives. And so we are asking, Lord, for mercy and protection for families, for the hostages that are currently being held captive, for the women, for the children that are being abused, mistreated, and even murdered in the middle of this conflict. We're asking God for mercy. Save people, protect people, even as governments, countries, and ideologies clash. Lord, would you release mercy on people? So that's how we're praying, those 5 points for the church in the region, that it's made up of Israelis and Arabs and Palestinians, that they would be a bold witness for the gospel, that they would display the one new man reality that's been accomplished through the finished work of the cross. Number 2, that demonic assignments against the Jewish people and resistant to the gospel in the region would be restrained. Number 3, for laborers to be thrust forth. Number 4, for the peace of Jerusalem. And number 5, for mercy and protection for real people and families. So join us in praying this way if you're following MAPS Global. And in the days to come, we'll be updating you with what is happening and what is going on with our bases in the region. So thank you so much for praying with us. Thank you for joining us. We love you.